Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Muslim Minds. I'm so excited to join you guys today. We have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Farah Malik. Farah and I have been working together for a while now. Good friend. We're really excited. Hopefully, you guys enjoy the episode and make sure that you subscribe, you like, share the content if you like it. We're really excited to bring you as many episodes as we can, and hopefully, you guys enjoy. So, with that being said, Farah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, I know that you know, um, you've gone through several sort of challenges in your career, both professionally, personally. But give me the rundown. If I said who is Farah Malik, what are you saying?
I'm saying that I am very proud to be my parents' daughter. My father raised me very independent. We were four girls and one boy, so he never made us feel like, we were a burden on him or that he just had girls. He was very proud of us. He raised us like his sons. Not that that is like, oh, I needed a son, but he wanted us to be independent and not have to depend on anyone if it ever came down to, you know, having to do things on our own. So Farah is a strong, independent, single mom who's very, very blessed to have her two kids.
I saw that you brought your kids today,
I
um,
did. They go with
and
me everywhere.
yeah, I actually I kind of relate to your story because, um, well, not as a parent, but as someone who has grown up through difficult, you know, challenges with my parents and kind of seeing the way that they've interacted with me throughout the years. But let's pivot over to a little bit of your sort of background. So, um, what do you do now? How'd you get into it? And sort of where do you see yourself? Like where do you want to go?
Well, things changed a lot. My dream was to become a dentist, and a lot went hap- a lot happened that obviously I didn't get to where I wanted to. But Allah has different plans for you, and that's okay.
Of
You
course.
plan and then He plans. Um, I started off at Panera right out of high school, and I was like, okay, great. Very quickly I moved into management, and then I kind of switched over to a salon. And I was like, all right, this is interesting. Then I kind of learned a little bit of hair. Um, then my sister's dentist was looking for a front desk, and I kind of just was referred there, and I started doing front desk. And as the years went by, I was very intrigued with dentistry, and I wanted to get on the clinical side of it. So I got my chance to become an assistant, and I was an assistant for over, I want to say, 12, 12 years. And throughout my journey, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. Um, I went to school on and off, but I was also going through a divorce, and then I separated and finalized the divorce. And it's kind of hard to go to dental school as a single mom. So that kind of just derailed a little bit. As your kids get older and you don't have much help, my family's great. Not that they didn't help me. If it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. My brother, my sister, my friends, they are my family, and they were always there to help me. Um, but I needed something where I could spend more time with the kids. And with COVID and quarantine, that kind of helped me realize how much time I had missed out as a full time mom and a full time worker. So I wanted to be there with my kids. I wanted to go on field trips. I wanted to drop them off. I wanted to pick them up. And for me, I'm going to say it's the people in my life that have been a blessing as opposed to um, opportunities due to education or things like that. I had a very good friend who was a hygienist, and I was referred into where I am today. I'm a travel coordinator for KGMP. I've been there for almost 2 years. So I do a lot of travel for the programs and the executives and the corporate people. So yeah, that's where I am today.
I like that you kind of broke into the food industry out of high school because that's how I started. Our viewers already know this, and I think we've talked about it a little bit. I started at Domino's.
Okay.
Actually, while I was still in high school, so I was 16. It was really my first real job, and I ended up being there for almost 2.5 years. kind of started at the bottom, making $8 an hour,
Hmm.
taking a lot of crap from people. But eventually I was able to, sort of become an assistant general manager, before ultimately leaving. But I think starting that struggle of starting at the bottom and kind of building something for yourself rather than just it being handed to you, um, speaks volumes about character and sort of the resilience that we have. So I really respect that. I want to pivot over for a second. Um, I know you had obviously a lot of personal things going on in your life. You mentioned you went through a divorce. You obviously have your kids. What was it like? What do you remember as being some of the real struggles, um, sort of balancing work, school, and sort of your family? I mean, I'm sure looking back on it now, you kind of have those moments where you thought this could fall apart at any moment. So, what was that like for you?
Every day it falls apart, and every day I try to put it together. Um, I'm for me, it's of course we all want something, um, but what I've learned over the years is as long as you have faith, as long as you believe Allah's there, as long as you know that He's the only one that you need to worry about. And I've learned that very recently. I mean, I've always believed in it, but I've become very strong in believing it. Um, it'll all end. Good days end, bad days end. Um, I think my family, juggling work, juggling the kids, sometimes you're not given a choice. Like you don't have a choice, and you can either give up or you can just pick up where you are and just walk with it. Sometimes you have to run with it. Recently, I read something that sticks with me, and it says something along the lines of, I have my kid's child a future in my hand, so I don't have a choice. What I do today and how I show them and how strong I am or how much I keep going and my just the person that I want to be and the people that I want them to be. I have to show that to them every single day because who they become tomorrow is in my hands. So if I'm going to sit here and feel sorry for myself and, just wait for things to happen, that's what they're going to feel like. That's what they need to grow up as. And they're going to wait for the right thing, or they'll wait for the right people to just hand things to them. You want something, you got to go up, get up and go get it every single day. You got to get up. You have to go to work. There are days, on my bad days, I don't want to get out of work, or excuse me, bed, and I don't want to go to work, or I don't want a mom. And that's okay. But a lot of times society gets us into feeling bad for doing those things. Like you're a mom, you're not supposed to feel bad. You're supposed to love your kids. Absolutely. I love my kids to death and I'll do anything for them. And I have been for the past 9 years all on my own. Um, and that'll never stop. But that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to get tired. A lot of times on my bad days, my friends, my family, and I love them for that because they're always supporting me and they're always giving me optimism on, hey, you got to keep going. You're so strong. I don't, you can't give up, all that sort of thing. And that's all fine. But sometimes you just want someone to be like, hey, like, go ahead, cry. Go ahead. It's okay. You're allowed to have bad days. You're allowed to say, you know what? I don't want a parent today. Um, that doesn't mean you love your kids any less. You're a human, you know?
Of course. Um, it's just it's so real to hear sort of the parental perspective because, like I said, I've been through sort of that child's perspective of seeing the struggle and when you're a kid, you see your parents struggle, but you don't really understand it in its full context. Um, at least for me, I didn't understand until I was a lot older, even recently, where I look back to what my mom was doing, what my parents were doing 5, 10, 15 years ago, and I'm like, wow, like they really sacrificed a lot for me. Um, you mentioned your family, your friends being a great deal of support for you. Within the Muslim community, did you have any resources, any people you would talk to, or did you feel like there was any sense of help that you personally were able to get from within a Muslim community outside of your sort of inner circle?
I'm going to be very honest. I probably would have had I reached out, but I never did. Um, I'm very close knit, home, work, family, friends. That's as far as I've gone out. But I'm sure the community is huge. There are people. Um, for me, I think part of it was because I married outside of my culture. My ex husband is from Peru. So I got a lot of backlash when that happened. There's history behind it. Of course, I would go back and change a lot of things that I did, but you can't change the past. Of course, and I will never change the outcome because I have my kids because of it. I would have just changed how I went about it. Um, but people make mistakes. And I think in our community, it is the hardest thing for people to forgive. It takes a long, long time. The same people who point fingers at you for your mistake come back years later and pretend to love you and be by your side. And I'm not saying that there aren't people like that, but I've just had a lot of experience where, you make one mistake and you're the worst person in the world. We all make mistakes. And being part of a community and a culture where you're just constantly pointed or looked down on based on the mistakes you've made, I think I shut myself out of that because I'm a very forgiving person. I see the good in people, and I was very disappointed that, there are so many people out there who look at you and judge you for the things that you might have done, but then they forget all the good that you've done. Just one mistake changes that. I don't think our community is very open to change. They're not very open to forgiveness. We talk about it. We say that, yeah, we want to, but it's the hardest thing for us.
When you say community, I'm assuming you're talking about sort of like the Pakistani community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So within Pakistani culture, my dad is Pakistani, but I'm not really in the culture as much as you probably are. Um, do you think there's almost a stigma against people, specifically women who get divorced, who have children? Um, do you think that the culture kind of wants people like you to kind of stay low, stay quiet, not really make your problems known to other people? Or do you think that there's something else that sort of causes the cultural shift that you've experienced?
I can't speak for other people, but I can speak from my experiences. Um, I'm not very exposed to a lot of the people in our Pakistani community, but I am exposed to my family and distant relatives or friends. Um, and it's not easy. I'll say that. Um, for a very, very, very long time, I think what you're saying is true. Um, being divorced is, looked down upon. Being a single mom is looked down upon. I remember when I was separating, I was constantly told, just compromise, just compromise. And you can only compromise so much,
Sure.
right? You can only let yourself and your self worth be put down so much. I tried and tried and tried. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. We all make mistakes. I'm sure I've made my fair share in my marriage. But yes, it's not something Islamically, it's not something, divorce is not, something that we encourage. But if it comes down to it, a person, man or woman, should have the right to step away from it.
Of course.
And that shouldn't, change who you are. So yeah, it is the hardest thing because I hear about it. Well, who's going to marry, a divorcee? Who's going to marry a divorcee with two kids? It even went to the extent where one time I was told, like, leave your kids with your parents and then start your new life. Find yourself another person and start with them. And I was like, excuse
Wow.
me,
Yeah.
like it's it's all just a cultural shame. It's a shameful thing to be divorced. It's a shameful thing to be a single mom, but we've come a long way. We have changed. Things are a lot different. There are people who are accepting that, and there are people who see you for who you are. Um, you know, Everyone deserves a second chance. Um, so yeah, I think it just depends on to each its own kind of thing.
Of course. Would you? having gone through sort of all the stages of separation, divorce, figuring out how to, I guess, co-parent in a lot of ways, if there was sort of one piece of advice that you could give to other mothers, or women that are in the position that you were in, what would that advice be, and how have you incorporated Islamic values and your faith? How has that guided you throughout your process?
Sabr. Sabr is the biggest thing. I learn every single day. I'm a mom and a dad. My kids do see their father every other weekend, so it's not that he's not in their life, but I am a full time mom and dad. They live with me. And patience is the biggest thing, and praying and asking for just to be a good mom, to for my kids to be good Muslims, and to have respect and turn out to be respectful people in Islam and believe in the religion. I instill a lot of religion in my kids. We have conversations when we're driving, like when we're driving here. Um, they ask me questions and we talk about it. I'll tell them things, stories my dad used to tell us. It was a thing on weekends. At night, we would go in his room and he would tell us hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and stories of every other prophet and all these things. Now I'm teaching them to my kids. Um, we have conversations about Islam. We have conversations about, angels. We have conversation about death. And my kids are 7 and 9, but they're very bright kids and they're very interested. Um, so I think a little bit at a time, patience, and it's okay to ask for help. Um, I don't like asking for help. And a lot of times when I do go out of my way, you know, I don't like repeating myself. So if one time someone says they're going to be there for me and then they don't show up, that kind of just turns me off. But that's who I am and I'm working on that. Having honest conversations with your kids and having patience, just remembering that whatever you teach them today is going to make them the person they are tomorrow.
Absolutely. Um, I it's interesting that you sort of bring up that you have these conversations because I remember specifically with my parents and my mom. I mean, of course, my parents took me to Sunday school when I was a kid, and I didn't always like it. I kind of, to speak quite honestly, I was sort of far away from the dean for a very long time. It just wasn't sort of one of my priorities. I mean, growing up in a very open Western society, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things you're exposed to in school, in media, sort of everywhere you go. So it's important to kind of surround yourself with people that guide you towards becoming a better person.
Mhm.
Um, what is it like having these conversations with your kids? Because I remember when my mom used to lecture me, not even lecture me, just have conversations on Islam. I did not want to listen. I was like, this is, whatever. Like, it was just not something I was interested in. And I think it's really beautiful that your kids have already sort of taken an interest to those conversations at such a young age, because even at that age, for me, it was not until I was really 15, 16, 17 that things started to sort of make sense. So, what is your strategy with your kids? Is there a certain way that you go about having those conversations? Are they the ones with the interest themselves? So describe that dynamic to me.
It's a little bit of a mixture of both. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like sitting there having
Yeah,
conversations with them every day about Islam, and I'm not very, I should be, and I'm trying to learn to pray more often, 5 times a day whenever I can. Being at home helps a lot now. I
of
have my
course.
John namaz out, and I'll just go and quickly pray when it's time. That helps as opposed to being at, Panera where you can't step away, or
Sure.
at a hair salon where you can't step away and go and pray sometimes. That changes a lot. But yeah, no, don't think that I'm just sitting there having
No, no.
conversations
I
about
mean, it's
Islam all the time with my kids. And
it,
I'm not that, strict when it comes to it. And there's a balance.
of course.
And I grew up here. I was 3 when I moved here. But I don't think it's more of a lecture kind of environment with them. For instance, we were driving one day and my son Rehan would ask me about, like, you know, trying to think of a situation. He asked about, death. And so I told him what happens when once your soul leaves the body, what is the process? There is actually a YouTube video by Dr. Omar Salaman on there in the process of what happens to the soul once a person dies. And that's exactly what I told him. And these are conversations that come up if they ask me a question, or sometimes I tell them the story of, Prophet Muhammad hiding in the cave and the spiders coming to, cover the webs and all that stuff. These are stories my parents or my father told us, and they were fun to hear. I don't make it into a lesson or anything. It's just general conversations. Um, so that's how I go about it. It's not like every single day I'm sitting down. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. It's Islam
Let's
time.
have our hour of
Islam,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
But I think in this society, in this day and age, um, just a little bit, everything in moderation. Not so I'm not enforcing it to the point where they're kind of, because we have to, our kids are growing up in this time where it's like, oh, here we go again, kind of thing. So I have a very good relationship with my kids where, we'll sit down and talk, or we'll joke around. I lose my temper sometimes, and that's just part of parenting.
Sure.
But yeah, we have days where we just casually just start a conversation. It's not Islam hour or anything like that. It's not a strict conversation. There are general questions. Something might happen and they may ask, or if they're eating and I'm like, what happens if you don't leave, if you leave your food, what is shaitan gonna do? After eating, they have to say shukr alhamdulillah, they say bismillah, all that sort of stuff. It's just those little things. If you keep instilling it little by little,
Of course.
they know their culture, they know their religion, and they adapted over time.
Sure, especially from a young age. I guess that is really what it's about. It's incorporating Islam into your life, in a society, in a lifestyle that kind of pushes you the other direction. But I completely agree with you. I think for me, a lot of the times I felt like it was just kind of forced upon me, or it was just thrown onto me, and it was like, okay, this is what you got to do. I'm not going to tell you why you do it. I'm not going to tell you, um, why everyone else isn't doing it or is doing it, but this is what you have to do. And again, it didn't happen for me until I was older, where I kind of had that perspective shift, and I realized, like, okay, there's benefit, there's barakah in things that you do, and I wouldn't so much as put that on my parents, because they did their best and they had a very challenging situation. Um, my parents also divorced when I was very, very young. And my mom I lived with my mom and my siblings for a long time. And I still do, but it was definitely a challenge. And I think my mom, speaking quite honestly, she did her very best, and I applaud her, and I'm very grateful, and I always will be, because I heard something the other day, and it kind of touched me a little bit. It was, we're very hard on our parents, but we don't realize that it's their first time going through life as well. And it really made me think, because there are a lot of times where I kind of expect a lot out of my parents, or I'm like, they were wrong for how they treated me, or they were wrong for what they said. Even if it was just one flash in the pan, one moment of anger, I still kind of hold that grudge against them. But then I don't think, like, there's so many instances where they could have easily felt the same way against me. Because I have a baby sister, and it's very frustrating sometimes. You're tired all day, you kind of just want to relax, and then you see that she's made a giant mess of everything, and you have to clean it up and kind of explain to her, like, no, you can't put chocolate milk on the floor. um, but I think as I grow up, and I'm sure as your kids will grow up as well, they will kind of realize that no one has it all figured out, right? No one has all the pieces of the puzzle. We're all just trying to doing our best, and of course, through the guidance of Allah, we're all trying to sort of figure out how everything blends in.
Inshallah.
And may Allah make it easy for all of us. um, I guess my next sort of question or topic is, what are some of the stark differences you see between the way you grew up with your parents and your siblings, versus the way that sort of you parent your kids, or how your lifestyle varies?
I ask myself all the time, and I'll ask my brother this. I'm like, what did our parents do that we turned out this way? Because I like this is what I want for my kids,
Hmm.
like not that I'm saying like we're the most amazing kids in the world, but um my parents passed about almost 2 years ago. And from that time on, I'm gonna say that I think I have been a lot more closer to Islam than I was before. Of course, I grew up very close knit, like sheltered. Didn't go out with friends. Was barely ever out at night. We weren't, out with friends. There was maybe one or two friends that we were allowed to go out with. Come home at 8 o'clock. I don't want that for my kids, but there were times when I wish I could tell my parents the truth, and I just felt like I couldn't, because they were very influenced by their friends or family about, oh my gosh, you let your daughter out this long? Gosh, you're not supposed to do that. I think a lot of it has to do with trust. If you have a good relationship with your kids, and that's not to say they're not going to mess up. Every child is going to mess up. We all have made our fair share of
Sure.
mistakes. But the idea for me is that they should feel comfortable enough to come to me and say, hey, mom, I did this and I need your help, as opposed to hiding it from me. I'm not trying to be their friend because a parent should not be their friend, but I'm also trying to have a relationship where they can trust me enough when they're in trouble. Or, they can say, hey, I want to go out with this friend. Um, we're going to go to this place and I'll be back by this time. And then they will keep their word because they know that I trust them, and they have to, come up to that par and say, okay, mom said to be home by 10 o'clock, so I got to be home at 10. That way I can be out again next night. And them as a person should know what's right from wrong. You know, um, Growing up, I knew to stay away from drugs and alcohol and things like that. That is something that they're going to have to, of course, by religion, I'm going to teach them. But living here and the friends that we have and the culture that we're kind of around, you're exposed to all of that.
Of course.
And those are decisions as they get older, they become their own person. They're going to have to say, this is right or this is wrong. And religion becomes part of that and say, well, in Islam, we're not supposed to do this. Um, there are things that I want to work on because I'm not, and say, we're not supposed to do this in Islam, or this is Sunnah and this is Farahs and all that kind of stuff. Um, but at the end of the day, it's just who you are and who you want to be.
Of course. I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think again going back to how young your kids are, they're 7 and 9, right? That's a really young age to really start thinking about a lot of these Islamic concepts, and I think that kind of reflects on you as a mother. Like you're really ahead of the game compared to a lot of people.
I don't think so.
Because I think, well, I mean, I'm just speaking from experience. There are a lot of people I went to school with, um, and of course, everyone comes from different backgrounds. Some people emphasize Islam more than others, and I'm not in the business of telling people how to parent. Um, but I think it's important to do what you've done, which is start young, because if they kind of build that trust with you at 7 and 9, you know, at that age, they're not really in any positions to find themselves in some serious trouble, right? They're not driving, they're not going out by themselves, right? But when they become sort of closer to my age, not that I'm a teenager anymore, but 16, 17, 18, I'm sure you remember just as well as I remember when I was 16, I was all over the place. And knowing that they have that person that they can trust, and knowing that they can come back to you even if it's, hey, like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, I got caught, wrong place, wrong time, like something happened, knowing that they can come to you, I think is really important, because I personally know a lot of my friends and a lot of people in the community that I've interacted with, they don't have that. They are like almost scared of their parents, like, no, no, I do this, but my parents could never find out, like you can't tell them. um, they feel like they have to hide a lot, and they feel like they almost can't be their true selves with their parents. And if you think about it, that's almost kind of sad, because if there's anyone in the world that you should be your true self with, it should be your parents, because they've quite literally, I mean, made you from when you were little. Everything you are is a result of their efforts. So um, I find it really beautiful that you have those sort of conversations and you have those moments with your kids, even at this young age. So I think that's something really special.
I was just gonna say, like, growing up, my parents with my siblings, we had a great relationship. We were all, if there was one thing you people would say, that you could never break this family apart. Um, we didn't we we had a very close relationship with my parents and our siblings. It was just everything was always intertwined. Then my parents left, went to Pakistan, they got deported, and of course, at that time you realize, okay, these are my parents. My brother took most of the responsibility. Um, May Allah Ta'ala give him reward for that.
Mm.
He was 16. But at that moment, you realize, like, okay, these are my parents. And now they can't see us as often. They spent 12 years of their life with half of their kids on this side of the world and the other on that side of the world. And they couldn't, it was like every 2 years or 3 years, they would wait for us to come for 1 month so we could all finally be together. Sometimes all of us could make it, other times we couldn't. So they never really had all their kids together at the same time.
Mhm.
And I thought that we were really, really close. Of course, we had our differences as we got older and we were adults. We're like, all right, we got this. Like, your mentality is a little different. You grew up, you have your challenges with your parents. Um, and there's times when you're upset at them, or you're just like, you know what, you didn't back me up when you were supposed to. But alhamdulillah, my parents, no matter what happened, no matter where, my life took me, my parents always supported me. Um, and they said, you know what, this is your life. If this is what you want, we're there. Um, no matter what happens, we're always going to be there. And they were. But when they passed, for me, and I can't speak for my siblings, but I think for me, it was like there were so many times that we took our parents for granted. Even though I felt like we had a great relationship with them, but you sit and you dwell on the parts where you're like, was it really worth it to be upset at them for that one day? Um, and you realize of all the things that they were battling that you didn't realize behind the doors that they never expressed to you. As a parent now that I'm like, oh my gosh, did my parents go through this? Did we do this stuff to them? How dare we make them go through all of this stuff? So there are certain things that you learn in life, but at a later part when you're kind of growing up or you're in the same shoes, um, if that doesn't change your perspective, then I don't know what else will. Um, but just love your family, love the people you love, because honestly, you don't know when it's the last day.
Of course.
And we all sit here and we're very, apologetic, and we're there for when someone loses someone. But I personally, as someone who's been through it, um, you don't really understand grief. You don't understand trauma unless you're actually going through it. And a lot of the things that I've learned to do or be with my kids is because of the trauma I've been through, my experiences that I've been through. And instead of taking it all in a negative role, I've learned over time to, you know what, I don't want my kids to go through the same things. I don't want them to have the same life that I had. I want them to, in the moments that where I was weak and I couldn't stand up for myself, or I just dealt with things because I thought I deserved it, or, because I had a good heart. It's okay to say no and walk away. It's okay to be like, you know what? I love you, and you're just not good for me anymore. And it's okay, even if you're a female, to say, I don't deserve this. No, and just go. And I am trying to mold my kids into people who don't have a lot of that trauma that comes from home. Not to say that my parents brought me that much trauma, but I did go through a very hard life. Immigration, deportation from my family, the separation, my divorce, and the reason for my divorce, and being a single mom. All of these things come with their own fair share of grief and drama. Trauma. And so I didn't know how to handle it, but I learned. I read, I educated myself, and I'm still doing it every single day. And who I am compared to who I was last year is not the same person. I have my boundaries, and I have put my foot down, and I will not allow certain things in my life anymore. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You can leave. There's the door.
I really love that attitude and that mentality because um first of all, I can't even imagine what it's like to go through some of those things that you've been through. But I really like what you said about being easy on your parents because I think when you're young, especially when you're going through those teenage years, you're like, oh man, like my parents are the root cause of all my problems, all my struggles, all my
You don't
headaches.
understand me.
Yeah, exactly. And I probably owe my parents an apology for some of the things I've said to them and some of the ways that I've treated them. But it doesn't come until you get just a little bit older, either by becoming a parent or by losing them or both, or sort of just taking a step back and realize, okay, the world doesn't revolve around me.
And
Like,
you know what, Danny? I'm going to add to that. 90% of the time, it's already too late before we realize it. Not that I don't think there were things that I could apologize to my parents and say, I'm so sorry for hurting you or saying this, or I put you through all these things. And I had my opportunities to apologize, and I did. But when I lost them, it was like, my gosh, you know? So, yes, your parents, they're learning every single day to be a parent, just like you will. Um, so go uneasy on them because they don't know it. Parenting is not something that's taught, it's learned by doing. Responsibility is not something that's taught, it's learned by doing. You actually literally have to jump off the ship and dive into the ocean to learn how to swim in those tides. It doesn't come natural.
I could not have put that better myself. I mean, that was like the one sound bite from everything. That was perfect. Um, Farah, you've gone so much into your story. You've told us sort of the way you grew up, the struggles you've gone through, how that's defined you as a person. If there's sort of one idea or one phrase or one, I guess, theme in your life that has kept you going from beginning to where you are now, and inshallah, hopefully for many more years into the future, what do you think that would be? How would you, if you had to put something sort of like, imagine this, you wake up every morning, something that you have to put on your wall every morning that you see, something that defines you, what would that be for you?
I don't think I have to see it because I know it. Um, and maybe my friends or my close people close to me already have heard this because I say it a lot. When I die, and Allah asks me, you know, what did you do or why did you do this? That's not something I'm willing to answer. Like, I would be embarrassed. So, having a good heart, knowing that you're not like screwing someone over, um, I can't go to bed like that. Knowing that you're a good person at heart, no matter what you did, your best to be there for a certain person or show up or do the right act for your friends, your kids, your parents, your significant other, your spouse, whatever. As long as you have a good heart, you're not failing because you're answering him at the end of the day. So I live my life every single day knowing that I have never, ever, ever intentionally screwed anybody over. And I will never try to because I have to answer to him when I do. And that's my fear.
I mean, you're so right when you say that. Um, and that's such a good way of looking at it because you're right. I think a lot of people forget that at the end of the day, we all die, right? No one lives forever. Every soul will taste death. That's what we're told in Quran. Um, and we are going to be asked about what we did, and we do have to answer for it. So I think living in a way where at the end of the day, even if it wasn't perfect, even if you didn't do everything that you needed to do, even if you made some mistakes, as long as at least what I do is I go to sleep every night and I think, okay, if I were to die tonight, would I be satisfied with the way that I lived my life today? And I think, for the most part, I try to say, of course, no one is ready for death. No one can truly be ready for death. But I at least try to tell myself I did my best. I did everything that I could have done. I could have done better. May Allah forgive me. But I'm cognizant to the fact that I'm only human, and there's only so many things that you can do in one single day. And I think that's truly the only way that someone can live life. And I've seen people many years older than me tell me that and say, I wish when I was your age that I had realized that, because I lived 40 years of my life. Now I'm in my 60s, and I realized I was never living for Allah. I was living for myself. And so I think it's really such an important message, and a message that we're trying to get to our audience, and the youth in general need to hear it, because like I said, there's so much craziness going on in the world. I mean, we're living through it, right? And your kids are going to live through even more, and my future kids will live through even more. I mean, we really never know what the world is going to look like, but from what we can see, it's only getting worse, and it'll continue to get worse, right? um, so keeping that perspective in mind, keeping that balance of faith in mind, keeping that ideology of, well, we are Muslim first and foremost. That's how we're going to apply Islamic values in our life, and that's how we're going to live. And if other people have a problem with it, then there's the door. I truly think that's the only way to live. So with that being said, Farah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being on the show. Rather, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. It's a beautiful story. It's an inspiring story. I know that there are so many others who have been through what you're going through, to some degree, and I really hope that, hopefully you had a good time sharing your story. Thank you again so much for that. To everyone watching, thank you so much for watching this episode today. Please make sure to share, like, follow. We want to thank you all for joining us. We will be coming out next week, inshallah, with our next episode in the series. So with that being said, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Farah Malik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.